It's all about perspective, you know. It reminds me of a story of a boy who, you know, he thought he was the greatest batter in baseball. And he went outside one day and he had his bat and he had his ball and he took the ball, he threw it up in the air and he swung and he missed. Strike one. He said, I'm the greatest batter in baseball. Picked the ball back up, threw it up in the air, he swung, he missed. Strike two. He said, I am still the greatest batter in the world. And then he got his stance and he threw the ball up in the air, swung, strike three, he missed. And he sat there and he thought for a moment. He said, I can't believe this. I am the best pitcher in the world. And his perspective was changed. How he saw himself affected the way he responded. And I'm going to talk to you today, and just it reminds me of one more story before I get into this, of a little girl who was drawing, and her mom and her dad came over and said, honey, what are you drawing? And she said, well, I'm drawing a picture of God. And they said, well, honey, no one's ever seen God before, so you really can't draw a picture of him. And she looked up and said, wow, well, now they'll know what he looks like. It's all about perspective. And so I'm going to talk to you today not as a car person. I'm not going to talk to you today as whatever your title is. I'm going to talk to you today as an individual. I'm going to talk to you today as a person with a goal and with an aim that we're going after, a target that we're aiming at. And that simply is what our focus is here, on getting better before trying to get bigger. Several years ago, Chick-fil-A began to lose some market share for the first time to an up-and-coming competitor called Boston Chicken, and as we know today as Boston Market. And back in that time, Boston Chicken was taking market share from them, and they were scurrying. They didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to regain that, so they had a meeting. Truett Cathy decided, let's get all our marketing guys together, our VPs, everybody who we need to, so that we can figure out how we can get bigger faster. So they're in the room, they have their charts are all up there, they have all their figures, and they're talking and they're presenting, and Truett is sitting at the end of the table, and as he's sitting listening to what they're talking about, it seemed like he was somewhat disconnected from the conversation. And as he's listening, he began to bang his hand on the table. And he said, I am sick and tired about talking about how we can get bigger faster. And then he paused. And he said this, and it shifted the entire conversation. What we need to start talking about is not how we can get bigger faster, but what we need to do is start talking about how we can get better. And then he said this, which revolutionized everything and changed the whole business model for Chick-fil-A. He said, if we get better, our customers will demand that we get bigger. If we get better, our customers will demand that we get bigger. And today, that's going to be our focus. Today, that is what we are going to look to as an individual. Because if you want a better organization, you need to become better individually. So I'm going to talk to you individually. I'm speaking to you, and I'm going to call you and challenge you to get better. We need to first realize that better is never a final destination. Rather, it's a continuous journey with many stops and goes. Better is never a final destination. It's a continuous journey with many stops and goes. There's really no end to getting better. The better we get, the more we realize we need to do better. Anybody ever notice that? The better we get, the more we need to what? Get better. It seems like the better we get, the worse we're off sometimes. It's like, man, we're just focusing on trying to get better, but things just seem like they're getting worse. Well, a lot of times it's not that things are getting worse. It's just that we're starting to see things, again, from a different perspective and how we can become better in those areas. And again, it's not that they're getting worse. We're just finally seeing how bad they really are, right? So, in order to get better, we're going to involve implementing what I call the E3 formula. The E3 formula is simply this: evaluation plus education equals elevation. Evaluation plus education equals elevation. Evaluation is simply this: the act of evaluating. That's deep, right? So it's determining the value or significance of worth of something. It means to appraise. Let's speak on our language. It means to appraise. We do this. We understand appraisals, right? We do trade appraisals. It means to estimate the value of something through careful examination. When we start evaluating ourselves, we start evaluating something, it shows us the real-time worth and value of what it's like in the condition that it is. We start doing a trade appraisal. What do? We go ahead and we start looking at the car. We do a silent walk around. We start touching the tires. We start touching the dents, letting them see how bad their trade really is. Start devaluing their trade in front of them. Start taking piece by piece everything apart. What are we doing? We're helping them see that their trade that they thought was worth all the money isn't. And so we're doing a walk around. We're looking at it. We're doing an appraisal. We're looking at an evaluation. Then once we have that, once we have an evaluation, then we can educate. Education is simply this. It's more than just gathering information, because so many times people think education is just gathering information, knowledge. That's all it is. But it's not. It doesn't stop there. It goes further. It's gathering information and retaining the knowledge of what we're taught and then applying it. You see, the great Herbert Spencer said this: the great aim of education is not knowledge, but action. It's not just knowledge, it's action. It's not just hearing, it's doing. And then once we get that education, then we begin to elevate. Elevation is simply raising up to a higher level. Who wants to go higher today? Anybody? Individually? Anybody as a company? Who wants to go higher? We all look within ourselves, and I'm sure we can sit and just lay out all the bad stuff in our life. But it's not just for us to look at and say, oh, where do we go from here? No, it's to look at and say, okay, how do we get better? The good news is this: as long as there's breath in your lungs, you can get better. It's never too late. It's like Dr. Jolly says, the best is truly yet to come. So when we do these evaluations, we look at our employees. We do our 90-day evaluation. We can do a 6-month or a quarterly evaluation. Then we do a 6-month evaluation. Then we can do an annual evaluation. But what about a self-evaluation? Have you done one of those lately? What's the real-time condition of our lives? How do we see ourselves? You see, again, appraising a trade is much more easier because there's no personal connection to it. There's no emotion tied to it. So you don't have to worry about, there's no feeling attached to that. So you can go ahead and just start, chopping it down. When you sit across from an employee, sometimes there is the emotion and there is that feelings that are there, but it's a little bit easier for me to evaluate you than it is for me to evaluate me. Would anybody agree to that? Sometimes it's easier to look at someone else and point out what's wrong with them than it is to stand in front of the mirror and deal with the boogers in our nose and all the stuff that's not fixed up right on our face and the stuff that we need to clean up right? So, appraising a trade is so much more less personal, but appraising ourselves is so much more personal. When we're appraising anything other than ourselves, it takes away that touch, that feeling, that sensitivity. But when we start looking inward, we tend to become more sensitive. And we kind of brush it off as not, we're much more merciful on ourselves and graceful on ourselves than we are when we do it on someone else. We put the hard judgment on them. But then when it comes to ourselves, well, I'm getting through it, I'll get there, I'm working on it, it's day by day. But everybody else, it's like, when you have kids, you're like, you need to fix it now. You need to take care of it now and get it done now. So we need to start coming back and taking a look at ourselves as if we were being looked at from someone else's eyes. Do a silent walk around on ourselves. We do it all the time. We do it to the vehicles. We do it to others. We appraise others. We start looking them up and down. seeing all the shortcomings in their lives, start comparing them to us. But we need to start giving ourselves a SWOT, as Sean would say. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Start looking at these in our own lives. The theme for the next 3 days is simply this: do more, be more, and achieve more. For this session, I'm going to say the same thing using different words with bad grammar and in a slightly different order. I'm going to say it this way. When we be better, we do better to achieve better. I want to say it again. When we be better, we do better to achieve better. I mean, here we go. Listen, if we want to be more, do more, and achieve more, it all starts with being. Someone say being. We are human beings before we are human doings. And when we operate from human beings, then we are human doings accomplishing human achievements. That's good. See, if I was in church, I would have 2 or 3 amens on that one right there. Thank you. See, our doing is dependent on our being and not to be reversed. Dr. Wayne Dyer said this. He said, I am a human being, not a human doing. Don't equate your self-worth with how well you do things in life. You aren't what you do. If you are what you do, then when you don't, you aren't. This is not Dr. Seuss, okay? But it sounds like it. I'm here to say this to you. Whether you make $20,000 a year or $1 million a year, your year-to-date never determines your self-worth or value. Too many of us tie our worth to our paycheck, our title, our position, our rank on the board for the month, how many units we put out, the neighborhood that we live in, the name brand of clothes that we wear, the cars that we drive. But listen, none of that ever determines the TMV, the true market value of our lives. Too many people allow what they have to dictate how they act and how they treat others. Too many people allow what they have to dictate how they act and how they treat others. Amen. Come on, bro. I'm going to take Sansone to church today. Too many people tie who they are to what they do. Too many people allow what they do to dictate who they are. Listen to this quote. This is so strong. Doug Erlinson said this. He said, when the prop of a job is knocked away, men often feel worthless. You want to know why? This is simply because our jobs provide a paycheck, and a paycheck puts a return on our skills, our energy, our abilities, our conversations, our ideas, our creativity, and our tasks that are completed. Listen, I've seen it. I've done it. I mean, I have a strong month. I come home. We put out 150 cars. I'm telling people what to do. We're moving metal. We're closing deals. We're writing up. We're moving paper. We're spinning paper. I get home. I say something to my wife, and she's like, do it yourself. I'm like, okay. You know? Because why? Because there's not a paycheck behind me making somebody be motivated by what I say when I come home. That's why so many times there's those friction pieces when you get to your house and you start thinking that you're working a car deal with your spouse and your family members. It just don't work that way. Hello? Listen, if your husband or wife is here and they're looking at you right now, I'm sorry, okay? It's not my fault. But listen, it shows you a tangible number that puts value and worth on the exchange of yourself for the responsibilities at work. This is why so many of us become married, not to our spouses any longer, but to our jobs and our positions, and we love to work so much. That's why we stay there all night. I got 2 more deals of work, babe. And you're like, man, I hope someone comes in. However, the things in life that matter most aren't things at all. Would you agree with that? Yes. You can strip it all away. After you put it all to the side and you're just standing there bare, what does it really come down to? What is it that we really are here for? Oliver Wendell Holmes said, what lies behind us and what lies before us are tiny matters compared to what lies within us. We are not depreciating items. We are not a car. The more dense, the more miles, the years that we add and accrue in our life never take away from our value. never take away from our worth. As a matter of fact, we are more like wine. The older we get, the better we get. You see, something's value depends greatly on its worth or importance to the one who possesses it. Listen, I'm talking to you today about getting better. I'm just reminding you why I'm saying what I'm saying. Many people have lessened their value in life because they're allowing the wrong people and things to set their worth. They're giving other people ownership of their worth. There's a show out there called the Antique Roadshow. Anybody ever hear that? The Antique Roadshow? You know what that is? This is simply what it is. People end up bringing their stuff to this roadshow, and based off of whatever they have, it could be an item that they had passed down from generation to generation, and it's just it's in the family, and they just have it, and they just pass it down. Or it could be something they went and bought at the garage sale, and they paid $1 for it. And now they're sitting there with a guy who actually now is evaluating this item. And the guy is saying, well, it seems like, this item here is from this year, and this is where it came from. And now he starts telling the history behind it. And what does this do? It begins to build what? Value into the item. And so this dollar item now starts becoming worth more and more and more as you're listening to the history behind it, and really where it came from and what it did in this life and in this world and where it's been, and maybe who had it and who possessed it at one time and who owned it. And all of a sudden, this $1 item is worth $100,000 because it's one of a kind. I remember I always used to say when I was working a car deal, and people would ask me, "Oh yeah, well, what's the value of my trade or whatever?" Well, you have the same one on your lot. It's out there for $20,000. It's got the same miles. It's got the same color, same make, same year. And I would say, listen, a car is like a fingerprint. It's one of a kind. You can have the same make, same model, same year, same look, everything, but it's just how it was handled, who owned it, and how they took care of it. That is what determines whether it's worth the same amount than what yours is worth. And it's the same thing in our lives. It's all built in. We are one of a kind. Our fingerprints, our personalities, our gifts, our abilities, it's all in there. We're one of a kind. We're special and unique. We're like ragu. It's in there. The good stuff, it's all in there. Our being is the reflection of our internal makeup. Who we are on the inside clearly is seen by what we do on the outside. Who we are on the inside is clearly seen by what we do on the outside. If we want to change the way we do things, we need to begin internally, because change on the outside will always follow change on the inside. Let me say it this way. In other words, outward change without an inward change is only a costume party. Outward change without an inward change is only a costume party. Lasting change starts inwardly, inside, and then it affects the outside. Change is simply what we deal with every day of our lives, from the time we were born till now. It's part of everyday living. From birth to toddler, childhood, adolescent, young adult to adult. Change, that's all we know. We have to embrace it. It's inevitable, but growth is optional. You see, here's the deal. You might not be able to change me. You may try, but some of you may try. You may try to change your spouses. You may try to change other people. You can't change your wife. You can't change your husband. But there's one thing you can change, and that's you. This is a powerful statement from John Maxwell. John Maxwell said this, and this hurts. It says that he said, "You are the way you are because that's the way you want to be." You are the way you are because that's the way you want to be. If you really want to change, you'll do it. You see, I said jokingly recently, I used to be in shape, but now I'm A shape because I don't work out anymore. Me and my wife, the last time me and my wife did P90X, that was probably like my son's 2, so it was 9 months before that. We looked so good, we had my son. So that's how it worked. So then I stopped. So I have 3 kids, and then we figured, okay, that's good. It works. Put me on the camera. I'll give a testimony for P90X. So, but because if we keep doing what we've always done, we're going to keep getting what we always got, right? If we don't change, nothing's going to change. So the situation that we live in doesn't have to live in us. We can change. We can make a difference only if we want to. And if the want to is strong enough, we will. We do what we want to. We make time for what we want to. We set priorities the way we want to. If we don't want to, it doesn't fit. Agreed? So look, in an industry that we work in the automotive industry, we're almost done, that's constantly striving to achieve larger bottom lines, more sales volume, and bigger gross profits. If we don't have a solid foundation that we're building on as we try to get bigger, as we try to get larger, increase more, and become bigger, it's going to all crumble and fall apart under the weight of increase. It's all about foundation. Somebody say foundation. Not one person that walks the boardwalk of Atlantic City looks at the buildings, the casinos, and the hotels and says, man, would you look at that beautiful gray foundation? That looks so nice. No, they ignore the foundation, and all they see is the structure. All they see is the lights. But all of what's seen can't be possible if the foundation's not strong. Foundations are the basis upon which something stands and is supported. It holds the structure up. And the size of that foundation is going to determine the size of the structure. I want you to understand that the foundation of a one-story ranch will never be able to withstand the weight of this building that we're in. It can't. The bigger the structure, the bigger the foundation. The bigger you want your structure, the deeper you're going to have to dig. The more we want to improve our lives, the deeper we're going to have to dig within ourselves to be able to do the things that we don't always want to do. Why did everybody get up this morning to come in here when you wanted to sleep? You did something you didn't want to do. Why? Because there's value in what you're sitting here listening to, because when you go back and implement it into your dealerships, it's going to give you a return of millions of dollars, hopefully. You saw the end result, and it motivated you to go beyond what you didn't want to do. We do it every day. Would you agree? It's just a matter of making it a part of what we want to change. As much as we admire the beauty of a structure, the size of a building, the trim work, the design and layout, if the foundation's compromised, if it's cracked and shifting, it doesn't matter how impressive it looks, because when challenged and stressed, it's going to eventually fall. This also stands true in us. Our foundation, the internal makeup, it supports us. It keeps us standing when challenged and stressed, because life brings challenges and stress. Would you agree? Right? Sometimes we make more out of it than what it really is, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute here. To sustain and hold up what people will see, we need to shore up and solidify what people don't see. To become better. In other words, what we do in private will uphold us, sustain us, and support us in the public eye. What we practice when no one's watching will be seen when everyone's watching. The integrity of our life behind the scenes develops our character on the movie screen of life. Listen, champions are not born after they win the championship game. Champions are born during practice, before practice, and after practice. Champions are born through the extra efforts and study time that nobody sees. All they see is the reward. They didn't see the pain, the struggle, the sweat, the commitment, the sacrifice. If we want lasting change to become better in all areas of our life, then we need to start looking internally. It's the condition of our heart. Because the condition of our heart affects the words of our mouth. And as a tiny rudder steers such a large ship, so the word spoken by the tongue controls the directions and actions that we make. The actions that we make determines the path that we take, and the path that we take will lead us to what we do or do not achieve. The scripture puts it this way: as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. In other words, as a face is reflected in the mirror, so the heart reflects the real person. What you think on consistently roots deep within your heart. Your thought life. Your thought life, what you allow yourself to think on, affects everything you will eventually do or not do. Our minds are a battlefield. Anybody ever have a battle going on in their mind with their thoughts? Listen, I wanted to say this to you real quick, and we're almost done. Just because we have a thought come through our mind doesn't mean we have to let it stay. Just because we have a thought come through our mind doesn't mean we have to let it stay. In the same way that just because a bird may fly over my head doesn't mean that I have to let it make a nest in my hair. The same is true with our thoughts. We allow what we want to come in or stay out. Here's what we need to do. I want you to think of this room as my mind right now. This room is my mind. You are all in my mind. And right now, you all represent a thought. Every single one of you are a thought in my mind. And I have my thoughts under control right now. All my thoughts are facing me. They're paying attention to me. And I am controlling my thoughts. All of you are my thoughts. Now here, DJ, stand up. Yes, sir. Just do me a favor. Come on up here. And just start running around this room real quick. Please. Fast? Whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to do. So here's what happens, okay? So DJ's a thought. Listen, look at me, guys. Hold on. DJ's a thought. So here's what happens. Because in our mind, when we start letting other thoughts take away our attention, we start becoming unfocused. Look at me, guys. Look at me. I want you to focus on me, not on that thought that's running wild in my mind right now. So what has to happen is we have to get these other thoughts. We have to get these other thoughts to start paying attention to what's being said. Because if you don't pay attention to what's being said because you're focusing on something else, you can miss what's being said and something that's real important for your life. So here's what we need to do. We need to get a bouncer at the doors of our mind. And that bouncer needs to ID every thought that comes into our mind and check it before it even comes in and allows it to come in. We need to look at it and say, dude, you are not allowed in here. You cause too much chaos. You cause too much problems. Get out. Control your thoughts. You can control what you think on. If we want to be more, to do more, and achieve more, we need to work on the inside to be better, to do better, and achieve better in everything that we influence. Would you agree with that? Yeah. Everybody stand to your feet. And I want you all to say this with me right now. Say, I will be better, do better, and achieve better starting today.